And at nighttime when people come home and turn all their Chinese junk on, that makes it worse, of course. So back to you, Paul. Whiskey Alpha 3, Victor Juliet Bravo, AB2OE in Richmond.
Very good. AB2OE, WA3VJB. Yeah, Michael's got I think he added a Kiwi system to his location. I see his node quoted more often than anybody's. And I know when I first got into the web SDR system, his was quite competitive with just about anybody else in the areas where I needed coverage. Not only on bands like 75 and 80 meters, but also in territories that he could hear there in Pennsylvania. His node and his territory were very good and matched where I was operating. But once I got onto the Kiwi system, I haven't been back to the FEF site in quite a while. Somebody told me that he has added that to it, which would be good. I don't think the web SDR system is being updated by its developers anymore. I know there are some user interface updates that have taken place by third-party developers, not those who originally invented the web SDR platform, but others who have modified the language of the thing to include like a magic eye tuning system on there. I like that. I think it's more a way of measuring signal strength with the green eye that closes with stronger signals than it is the kind of tuning aid that the antique radios used to have those accompanied. But yeah, it is. It's a wonderful thing. And I think for AM, on my QRZ page, you'll see some preset links on there. When I introduce this part of the hobby to somebody who has not been familiar with it, and they look me up in QRZ.com, they will see those pre-tuned links that they can hit. And one of them is here on 7290, I think. And it invites them to listen on a decent receiver as compared to, some that have inadequate passband. Unfortunately, I have to include the HQ170 in that category. It really doesn't have enough passband for wholesome AM. But those who don't have or know how to tune their contemporary transceiver for a decent amount of passband, those nodes are preset as well as by frequency to be able to give a pretty good sampling of what we're having fun with here. So it's an excellent way to introduce this part of the hobby, as you point out. And I do think it has increased participation in such a way that people can hear the stories, they can hear the depth of the personalities, and they can just, see that we're having a lot more fun than other parts of the hobby. So there you go. Yeah, I tend to use the SDR nodes as a recording aid. The sampling rate on the Kiwi is very good. And when combined with a visual screen recording application, you can get not only the visual waveform of the waterfall display, but also decent audio and post that around. With 10 meters having come in, I've been able to post to one of the UK AM Facebook sites how reception has been here in the States of various stations. And it's also one where, if you're not used to using the SDR system, the constellation of receivers that's on the internet, this can show you what's there. This can show a party how they can enhance their ability to receive in a noisy environment, such as your own, by using these external receivers, essentially, remote-controlled external receivers, to remain on the air with a measure of comfort that might otherwise not be available. I used to be associated with a museum station, K3RTV, which at the time consisted of a replica AM broadcast station with a mixing console, a retired broadcast transmitter like the one I've got here, and various other accoutrements that somebody would have seen at an AM radio station in the 1950s. And they essentially allowed me to keep the transmitter there as my transmitter. And we had an awfully noisy environment for 160-meter receive, which is where the transmitter was located. It was not yet converted to other bands, so crystal controlled on 160, but 160's reception at that location was terrible. So we used at that time, the web SDR platform, which I think came before Kiwi, to actually hear the stations we were working And for visitors to the museum, it was wonderful because we had this span of technology from a 1948 or 1951 in this case, Collins 300G, pair of 810s, modulating a pair of 810s glowing behind an observation window that in turn was surrounded by chrome, to the most modern use of a desktop computer and an SDR interface to receive stations. It's like, man, this is like 80 years of technology going on here. The visitors to the museum who otherwise had not been exposed to that range of technology would go, yeah. And they were like spellbound by it. But the museum's interests changed, and they dismantled the station, and I found a good home for the Collins at Brian's place, KB3WFV, if you've ever worked him on 75. He's got it on 160 from his place at Chesapeake Beach, just south of me here in Annapolis. Haven't heard him on in a while. I'll have to drop him an email and see how he's doing. But yeah, that's kind of tidies it all up together, Bob. AB2OE at Richmond, Virginia, WA3VJB. Back to you.
Okay, beautiful copy. And also beautiful copy here in Richmond. So yeah, that must have been an incredibly impressive display. All I can say is I'm envisioning what you said. It's awesome. From the early days of radio to what we have now, and what's interesting is how many of the basic principles have not really changed, but certainly the way of constructing things and designing things has changed so radically. Now I'm interested. Are you? I think you were using the McKay rig the last time we spoke, Paul. Are you using that now?
Yeah, that's how I'm hearing you primarily here in the room. It's dialed right in on 7290, but I also am recording off one of the nodes. Which one am I listening to? There's one in Maryland that I use in Westminster that's very good, and we're both coming in really well there, so I'm using that as an adjunct, but it's potted down right now. I can hear a little echo on you, so I've got your internet latency in there. But no, I'm listening to you here on the ITT McKay in the room.
Yeah, okay, yeah, there is a... it's because I have the AirSpy running, and also I have to mute the K3FEF, so I'm not that fast. And no, I think that's actually some feedback. Oh yeah, that isn't either one. I've muted both. That's feedback from my PC speakers. I have to do something about that. There must be some RF getting into the little speaker lines. So, but yeah, I wish I had a little more time to devote to this hobby, Paul. But I still work full time. The age here is 65, and I've been working since I was 13 years old. So I was hoping to retire next spring, but I think with the economy being what it is, and my wife being 2 years younger than I am, I'm not going to do that. There's also an echo, by the way, in this room. You're not the first person to mention it, but yeah, these speakers are actually I'm sure they're getting into the mic a bit. Yeah, it's kind of annoying for me. I have to, because I don't have a lot of space here. I kind of had to, and because of the fact that I'm using SDR, I kind of have to, when I shift back to receive, I have to kind of reach around and click on one of the four screens here, and in at least two instances of software, and then turn down the volume on the ICOM 761, which is actually not a bad radio for for listening to AM, and it doesn't even really have the AM filter in it that you can get with the 761. So I obviously need slightly more room in the shack, and when I retire, that will become a possibility. It's not a very big room, but a great deal of the room is taken up by work-related stuff. That's if I rip everything apart, then I have to rip everything apart for work, and that's kind of annoying. And had an interesting day. I came down with this cold, and at the same time, I see I'm drifting up there. Let me just go back down to 7290. Yeah, that's a little better. The Dominion Electric here in Richmond is doing the right thing, and they're spending some serious money burying all of the power line cables, and that's great. Except that Verizon didn't mark my fiber optic cable, which was really very shallow in the ground, and they severed it. I saw the backhoe. I'd come down to make myself a cup of coffee in the middle of the workday, and it was around 11 o'clock. Actually, I really should have been taking a sick day because I felt so poorly. And then, Dominion Electric made sure that I had a sick day. So, but it's all the panic is over. There's a temporary fiber line up. They just put it up early this morning, so I was really happy about that because I work in New York. I'm an IT professional, and I work on Long Island. I'm originally from Long Island, and we moved to Richmond about 9 years ago there, Paul. So anyway, so you always got to give me like about 10 seconds or maybe even 15 to get all the blasted audio turned up when I go from transmit to receive. Plus, I'm trying to be, I try to be a little bit polite and let somebody else jump in if they're there. But you're right about this, that all of these SDR receivers have really enhanced the art of AM and also the art of communication, because the quality of conversation, it's not surprising really, but the quality of conversation on a lot of other voice modes has sunk in just as the quality of conversation has sunk in society, so we really shouldn't be surprised. But it is a lot of fun. The 40 meters here in this part of the country is a lot of fun. I very often tune in. I'll do a lot of listening on 75. I don't do much transmitting on 75 because it's such a popular frequency. But it's all entertaining, amusing, and educational at the same time. So what ham radio should be. WA3VJB, AB2OE, turning all of my dials back to receive.
And while we do that, was there another station in there underneath? Hang on just a second. The other station want to join us? Yeah, I heard somebody right under your signal, Bob, when you first keyed up. Just a little whee, and it didn't last long, just about the duration of somebody's call letters. So let me drop it again. Don't do anything, Bob. Just let me drop it again, see if anybody wants to join us. WA3VJB, listening? Okay. I shall transmit with confidence then. Yeah, good transmission, by the way. A lot of good information in there and observations that match my own when it comes to the depth of enjoyment on the radio. Well, I've been selling this part of the hobby pretty hard, trying to take advantage of some momentum up at W1AW. A previous CEO had included AM as part of his executive agenda when he came in, Tom Gallagher. And we took advantage of that. We, meaning myself and a couple of other guys who've been into AM for quite a number of years, took advantage of that to help W1AW build out its AM infrastructure, part of which was the same museum that I was associated with, which had a Gates BC-1 Tango broadcast transmitter that came from Frederick, Maryland, most recently. And there was an arrangement made between W1AW and Connecticut's Vintage Communications Museum, W1VCM, to have the Gates brought to Newington from here in this area, where Timmy, WA1HLR, converted it to 160 and 80 meters, pair of 833As modulating a pair. Nice setup. And it was at the ARRL lab for I guess a few years. At the same time, I was able to connect with one of the broadcast audio processing companies where there's a CEO or a co-owner who happens also to be a licensed radio hobbyist. I said, hey, can you do these guys anything for a processor of some kind? Yeah, let's send them an Optimod. So he coughed up an Optimod 9300, which is worth about $4,000, to donate to the W1AW AM project. And it was sent up there right about when Timmy was finishing up the gates. And I was online with one of the other principals up there, Bob, WB1GCM, who you've probably talked with, assistant lab director, to recommend a Sennheiser microphone and a Shure, S-H-U-R-E, mixing interface, which would bring the mic level up to what the gates wanted to see, or what the Optimod wanted to see as it fed the gates. So we had the whole package built. And it was a nice setup. And then, wait, there's more. Bob and one of the QST editorial people decided it was time to review the AM transmitter called the Super Senior. And they became connected with Bruce, K7DYY, and acquired a Super Senior for W1AW as well. And it was intended to later become the 7290 voice bulletin transmitter, where they, as part of Tom Gallagher's executive agenda, finally switched 7290's weeknight W1AW voice bulletin mode over to AM to match the ARRL's Considerate Operator's Guide. And the Super Senior was intended to be the quarter kilowatt transmitter to accomplish that. So yeah, all kinds of good things happening. So by way of credentials, when I introduce this part of the hobby to other people, I say, oh yeah, the W1AW AM build out was fantastic. And then, Bob up and retired, and I think other people at Newington are kind of scared of the transmitter. It's like, oh man, there's 2,500 volts on that thing. So here we are at Halloween, and they're thinking Frankenstein transmitter. You know, Bob? Let me kick it back to you. AB2OE WA3VJB.
That's a very entertaining story, especially the ending, although it makes me kind of sad. And yeah, I remember some of this activity, because that was around the time that I had first gotten this Valiant and had had some restoration done on it and everything. And I think I had the pleasure of using the Valiant on during the AM rally, and I think I worked. I'm pretty sure I worked Bob. Yeah. Well, let's hope that the people at W1AW, figure out that it's not going to bite you, and So is Bob the engineering guy at W1AW? Is he still there?
No, he up and retired, Bob. He actually left the employ of the league, and I don't think he has access to the lab anymore. I think they let him in as a special concession for the AM rally. But no, he's kicked back now, and he's one of the principals at W1VCM, the Communications Museum of Connecticut, where the Gates has since migrated. That's who had the title to the thing. And it was kind of on loan to W1AW. So Bob and Larry, WA1LGQ, are setting up the museum station, which will replicate what they had going at W1AW. Go ahead.
Okay, that's really interesting. Well, at least we can say this, Paul. It is no longer impolitic, thanks to all of that good effort, to talk about amplitude modulation and the AM windows. I mean, I know all about the AM wars and Timmy's account of it, which is absolutely fascinating because it goes back to the time when I was a kid. And as I said, I'm 65 now. And when I was a kid on Long Island with a $30 shortwave receiver, listening to AM and all of the insanity that went on with sideband and I'll tell you a funny story. 7 or 6 years ago, when I first started getting on AM, I made the terrible mistake of telling some guys on one of the sideband nets in the evening, and I think it was on 40 meters, that one of my interests was amplitude modulation. and they doxed me, man. They must have texted each other immediately and said, "Don't talk to this guy. He likes AM." I'm not kidding. Somebody actually got on the air and explained to me why all of a sudden, because I looked at my power meter and everything, and I was getting out, but all of a sudden the silence was incredible, and I felt kind of sorry for them. I mean, because that's kind of silly and a little bit childish, but I guess war leaves scars, right, Paul? All wars leave scars. So that was my first introduction to AM, and probably because I'm part Irish, that only made me like AM more. Back to you, Paul. AB2OE, Alpha Bravo 2, Oscar Echo.
AB2OE, WA3VJB. Oh man, what a story, Bob. Yeah, I mean there are many stories like that, and I say it with a heavy sigh because we live now in an era where most people who felt that way are dead or in retirement homes. They're older than us, and they date back to sideband's struggle for acceptance, and I deliberately word it that way. When SSB was struggling for acceptance, and I've used that phrase in FCC filings, public comment records. I used it in articles. I've used it across the board to signify the push among certain people and manufacturers and lobbying organizations that happen to be spelled ARRL, to force the acceptance of SSB over AM. Part of the tradition, and I think Timmy will back me up on this, is that the league was never that enthusiastic about phone communications because they were primarily a CW group when they started out. So AM comes along and it takes up a fairly decent pass band, and there was a lot of congestion when phone communications became popular. So they never actually got enthusiastic about it because of its footprint. So that when SSB came along, it's like, well, here's a ship we can jump on. Let's promote it really heavily, to the detriment of AM. That's why there was a pejorative attached to it. It's like SSB is better than AM. And it's only that one aspect of reducing congestion, which these days is less of an issue than it was in those days. And of course, part of the side effect of the hostility that was generated between those who were happy with AM and enjoyed their homebrew construction projects and the warm and inviting sound of AM is that those who chose to adopt SSB would become belligerent toward those who were, quote, still on AM. Well, I'm not Irish, but I share with you a combative nature when something that I enjoy very much is attacked by those who either don't understand or don't respect varying interests. And I became quite a militant on behalf of AM, starting in the mid-1970s and continuing through this day when somebody turns me the wrong way. And fortunately, and I do say this quite gently, most of the people who ever had a belligerent reason to comment on AM are out of it now. They're not in the hobby to any prominent degree. And as a result, you've got the people who have followed them who don't know about those AM versus SSB wars. And they're quite receptive to this part of the hobby. And it's fairly easy to sell them on the idea that this is a very satisfying place to be, with rigs that are made today that sound good compared to, some of the transitional transceivers that did not include AM at all or included it as an afterthought. So as a result, we're sitting pretty right now, Bob. We're doing really well. And that's why I thought the timing needed to be good to help build out W1AWAM's infrastructure in such a way that made it a permanent part of the station's legacy, something that could not be undone if the mood ever were to change. So now, yeah, I'm very much on board with trying to promote the W1VCM AM presence. Larry and I have been in touch with the prospect of having that Gates back on the air this winter, and including for special events like the AM rally and the heavy metal rally and some of the other events that are out there. So here comes back to you. I got lunch coming up. I'm going to wrap it up pretty soon. Boy, sure, it's been my pleasure here. Kindred spirits and all that. AB2OE, WA3VJB.
Okay, Paul. Very good. I did see somebody tuning up on 7293, but they went away. So let me see. Let me just pause for a second. Okay. Yeah, nobody there. Yeah, I think we are sitting pretty, and I'm not somebody who joins things easily, and I kind of was annoyed, and I left the ARRL when the whole Morse code thing was pushed to drop Morse code, because I'm a huge lover of Morse code, and I always have been. But I have to admit, in hindsight, that the ARRL was right in dropping the code requirement. There are more CW ops now than there were when the code requirement was dropped, and that's because people have entered the hobby and then discovered at the age of 55 that they could learn CW and hammer away at 30 words a minute with the best of them, and so in hindsight, the league was right and I was wrong. And actually, I think I've lapsed, so I'm probably going to. Actually, after talking to you, I think I'm probably going to renew my my annual subscription to the league, because I think it's that particular event more than made up for the fact that there were other things that, in hindsight, I was perhaps too hasty and petty. Maybe I was being a little bit petty. I don't know. But that Gates really sounds beautiful, and I really do hope it's on the air in the next rally. And so yeah, it's great. I don't, from an engineering perspective, I don't know nearly 1/100th of what a lot of these AM guys do. I'm a software guy, and I'm also an amateur machinist and have so many varied interests that my interests are so divided that I guess you could say I'm a jack of all trades and master of none, Paul. But except for software, I would say I am pretty good at that. But yeah, we're very fortunate right now, and I mean that alone makes it, that whole story makes us very fortunate. Of course, all of the efforts of you and people like Tim and Bob and others have really helped. And I think that, of course, that along with the whole web SDR thing has really made for a great circumstance for us. Let's hope it stays that way. Let's hope that that beautiful piece of vintage AM hardware stays as a permanent fixture at W1AW. And with that, I'll let you go. I should give my voice a rest. I was a bit hesitant to even get on the air, but it seems like it's actually helping clear things up a little bit. I'm hoping I'll be all mended up by maybe Wednesday. I'm trying to do this without antibiotics if I can. I think so far so good, Paul. All right, well, 7-3, old man. Nice to work you again. I think the last time we worked was, gosh, 2021, I think. Yeah. Yeah, that's right, 2021, and it was also on 7290. So 7-3, old man. I'll listen out and have a pleasant day. It was really a pleasure talking to you. WA3VJB, AB2OE.
Pleasure was mine, Bob. Gee, I tend not to get going on the soapbox anymore because I'm preaching to the choir here when we're on AM. I save it for other venues. But you kind of brought out a couple of points that are always talking points, and to be able to share with somebody who understands why that was necessary is gratifying to me. So thanks for listening, too. I really think this part of the hobby is probably the last of the traditional areas where people have a technical pursuit. And it most definitely is the last where storytelling and the human interface with one another remains strong and satisfying. And you're not going to get that on FT8, you know? So take care of yourself, and please look for me again. Rest up. You're sounding fine. Like I said, I think you sound worse to yourself than you do to me.